another maxim I have with people is that our role as a leader is not to be the hero, it's actually to be the guide. Our job is to be the guide. Our job is to help people get to where they can go.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Andy Spell, and I'm one of the interviewers for the podcast for the Crucible Project. And I'm very excited to have our guest with us today, Martin Brooker. Martin Brooker has a podcast, and he's a leader in Australia. His podcast is called Frontline to Boardroom. He is a leader in teaching other leaders how to lead. He's part of the community in Australia, and I'm excited to have him as a guest on our podcast today. So welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Andy. Good to be with you.
So if you would please just take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, things that we might need to know, who you are, where you live, about your family.
Born in England, came to Australia when I was just 7 years old. And it was really quite fascinating to come from one culture to another, despite the fact that we have a common language. And I'm, I guess if you want to sort of put it together now, I'm a veteran of 37 years full-time service in the Australian Navy. Had operational service in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and the Pacific. I had command of my own ship. I was commander of our mine warfare clearance diving forces in Australia. Actually spent 2 years on exchange with the United States Navy in Japan. And was also our deputy commander of our forces in the Middle East and Afghanistan. And I really got fascinated in leadership along the way through hearing people like John Maxwell actually speak. And that kind of led me to really want to double down into helping people to become better leaders. And so I had an opportunity to do that in a couple of different projects inside the Navy and defence more broadly, and that led me to to run my own business now. I have 3 daughters who are adult, and I actually have 3 grandchildren with one on the way. So life's pretty full. Live in Brisbane, Australia, which is on the East Coast. So life's pretty good.
I love that. I did not know about your military service to that degree, so thank you for sharing that. And we're going to talk more about the leadership things because I think it's fascinating looking on your website. By the way, it's martinbrooker.com. So if you want to know more about this man, you can go to martinbrooker.com. There's some really great things to look at there. And I think it would benefit anyone listening to this podcast to go look at those things. So, Martin, what led you to choosing to go to a Crucible weekend?
Yeah, really good question. I found myself at a point where I realized that I had run out of the resources to kind of keep my life the way it was. And what I realized is my life the way it was actually not giving me all that I actually wanted. And wasn't actually healthy for me, and it wasn't healthy for the people around me. And I needed to go on a bit of a journey of transformation. And the decision to go to the weekend was a decision in a series of decisions to actually change. And I had this realization. I was 4 or 5 years out of the Navy and full-time service, and I just went, you know what, there's some stuff in my life here that actually is not useful, and I want to have a better relationship with my partner, Jacqueline, and I wanted to have a better relationship with my children who I had been separated from in terms of a marriage that had broke down many years beforehand. And while I had connection with them, I really wanted to improve that relationship, particularly as they were having their own children and having their own families. And so there were just so many things there that were going, you know what, the life I built here is actually not working for me, and it's actually not working for the relationship that I want to have.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, that's a good movement towards it. So you went on the weekend, probably not knowing what to expect fully. In what ways did God show up, or in what ways did things happen
Mm.
that were unexpected for you that
Yeah.
helped in that transformation?
Well, I think God had shown up because it was that decision to actually change, or to embark on a journey of change. It started at least 2 years in prior to going to the Crucible weekend. And in fact, I had been to explore men's work in the form of weekends and retreats and stuff. And I'd actually been to other um, ones that were Christian, but also ones that were secular. And the turn of events that led me to the Crucible weekend were quite sort of, I guess, divine in some ways, perhaps divine in all ways. I knew that I needed to be in a weekend where God was at the center, and that there was love and grace, and that there was a place that was safe, and that there was an opportunity to really wrestle with God. And I think that I came to the weekend wanting to actually get better in my relationship with God, but actually it was a lot also about getting better relationship with myself.
Isn't that fascinating? And what did the weekend give you in that relationship with yourself that you needed?
I think it was probably forgiveness and having a level of empathy for yourself. I mean, we talk about empathy in leadership a lot, and I think that we, as a leader, it's often it's pretty easy to have empathy for others, but I think one of the hardest things in life sometimes is to actually have empathy for yourself, to have enough self-love for yourself. And I think that was part of what I got from the weekend, is actually walking away from that, understanding more about what self-love and the fact that God loves you. Why wouldn't you love yourself?
Yeah, man, that is so good. I found that it is so true that there are things that I would say, Martin, in my mind to myself, that if I was counseling someone else, that I would never let them say about themselves or to
Mm,
anyone else. And there were judgments that I'd make, and just that self-love was not there at times. And the weekend gave me that as well, that empathy, and to look at myself and to have forgiveness and actually grace for myself
mm,
as well. Uh,
mm.
Anything else on the weekend that you walked away with that you thought, this helps me not only in my relationships, but also in my desire to help leaders become better leaders?
Mm, yeah. Look, I think there's a couple of things in that space. I went to the weekend in Australia, which was actually on the other coast. So it's the equivalent in the US of flying from New York to Los Angeles. And so there was plenty of time on the return flight to actually think about my weekend.
Yeah.
And you know what? You get on a flight, you might watch something on your device or whatever. I watched nothing. I spent 3.5 hours journaling about that weekend, and I got to share that firstly with Jacqueline, and it was really quite powerful because it was about being present with your own self, and I think that's what I got for the weekend, is of learning how to be present with yourself, to actually notice the emotions, to notice when God's speaking to you, when the divine sort of comes across your path, and sort of getting the nudge. And I came back in that conversation with her, and it was just it was I think a place where I felt completely present with myself, but also with her, and there was a connection there that perhaps we hadn't had before, and so that was super powerful. I know that actually that is also extended to the relationship I have with my daughters. And that's been super powerful as well.
Have they? Did they see the difference? Did you have to speak it, or did they see it, or what happened when you came back home and you started to connect?
Yeah, look, I think people, when it comes to relationships, at the end of the day, they're founded on trust, and you have a certain level of trust in your relationships, and I think what really has been the key has been to just continue to show up in the same way, in the new way of being, and that's been consistency around that allows the trust to rebuild, and it also just allows you to also then go deeper into the conversations and into a vulnerable space. I'm actually find myself much more easily able to talk about what's going on for me with my with Jacqueline and with my daughters as well. And my daughters are adults now, and there's perhaps there are definitely boundaries on what you might talk about, but there is a power in in ability to actually be vulnerable and to say, hey, I don't have it right all the time. Here's what I've been challenged with, but here's where I think we should go. And I was able to have a very powerful conversation with my daughters around the fact that in each generation we actually have a chance to break break the cycle of generational sort of challenges,
Mm-hmm.
and to break the generational behaviour, perhaps, whatever it might be, and to reset. And that's actually a choice, and we can make that choice when we've got the tools, when we've got foundations, um, and anchored. For me personally, in a relationship with God.
Right, Martin. I had some challenges that I just didn't realize, with my kids, with my wife, and just the ways that I was doing life. And the most beautiful thing I think I've found in doing soul work like Crucible or any men's or women's work is that I have gotten to reset some things and I've gotten to have
Mm,
those conversations. And the beauty of it is the people on the other side have been willing to reset with me and have
yeah,
accepted that. And they have grace
absolutely.
for me and I have grace for them. And I know that for some, they don't have that. But that reset button has been powerful in my own life. So thank you for stating it that way. And we're never too old to step into
Mm,
the work to reset some things and reframe
yeah,
some relationships that need that.
yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely that being honest with yourself, being able to be honest with the person in the mirror, and be able to look back at that person in the mirror, and actually we talked already about it. It's about sort of self love, but actually being able to be honest with that person allows you to be honest with other people.
Man, I agree. So good. So what has been different in your life since the Crucible weekend? What are one or two things that you've taken away that you've thought this was just good and I keep working on these things in my life?
Good question, Andy. I think one of the most important things out of a weekend is to continue to do the work and to stay connected with the community. There is what I appreciate so much about the Crucible Project is the fact that it's not just a weekend, but there is an opportunity to integrate what you've experienced in whatever shape or form that might be, back in the community. And for me, tapping into the Crucible Project in Australia's leadership, but also being able to continue to do the work through other programs that Crucible Project runs has been fundamental to helping me maintain that self presence and self love, and also to, yeah, I guess the other thing that comes to mind there is that less stuff phases me. I've learned what clean anger is. I the one of my challenges had been that I could get angry about stuff and what people had done to me, or what I perceived they had done to me, and it came out sideways, and it was not pleasant. And I think the ability to actually be calm in any situation, to respond to challenges in a clean way, and I think not necessarily we could explore it in detail, but I think understanding that there is times when anger is appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
but actually how do you do it in a clean way, and that allows you to maintain relationships, and to do it in a way though that expresses, hey, here is some disappointment, or here is some sadness that I'm having around this because there was an agreement and that agreement's no longer in place, or in my sense it's been broken. It's a conversation I want to have, versus anger that comes from a place of ego or bruising or trauma. And that's a powerful change for me, is the ability to actually recognize that if when things are perhaps not going so well, that I actually get to choose my response to that in a far better way than perhaps I've ever done before.
Man, that is so good. Thank you. Yes. It's fascinating when I interview men or women on these podcasts, how similar our experiences are to talk about clean anger and emotions and being in touch with those, and how much that helps us have some real intelligence in our relationships and in our ability to, again, communicate in a healthy, clean way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like in my work with leaders, big conversations are always about emotional intelligence. And, we talk about self-awareness, the ability to notice emotions in others, and how we regulate our own emotions. But you know what? The Crucible Project has been one of the real strong ways in which I've learned really how to regulate my own emotions. It's one thing to be able to notice them, but it's actually the ability to actually regulate it by being present to what's going on and to make good choices from that perspective.
Well, thank you. So how has the Crucible Project helped you in your leadership training? What did it give you in that? And even, I know you had some skills from years in the military. You already had some of these things in place, and I know that. But how has it helped you in the way, or changed the way that you do leadership with people?
Yeah, look, I think it's actually, I feel like I'm more integrated as a human. Lots of experience for me, and I'm the kind of person that can sort of take something that somebody's written about leadership, or the theoretical practice around emotional intelligence, but for me it's actually, I'm actually able to see now where it is where the reality of that is, and I think I bring the energy to that work that I do. I think it also comes, I find myself in that work that I do coming from a place of purpose rather than ego. And I'm not a self-promotion type person, but often you can get wrapped up in your own stories and from a place of ego. And, I find myself super present with the people that are there. We talk about service a lot in the military, talk about service a lot in the work that you do. And, it's actually, how do you actually be in the service of other people? And I think the Crucible Project and that journey from the weekend, and also the other work I've done since, has actually really helped me be present to that, and to be in far better service to other people in the leadership programs that I run and the coaching work that I do.
Man, that's good. Thank you so much. One of the first podcasts I listened to, I went back to the first one, and the good people helping good people. It just, I was sucked in right from the beginning. So people, again, if you're listening, this is a great podcast to listen to. And this one sucked me in because there were a couple of things that the men said that I jotted down. And I'd love for you just to take a little bit of time to expand on some of these things that maybe they said and the way that you heard it. But one of the men said, act the way you want to be remembered. I found that fascinating. And so when he said that, what did you take from him and what he meant about that? And he's talking about, I think, not only about being a good human, because they want to be good people helping good people, which I thought was fascinating. They don't want to work with bad people and help them to be bad people. So I love their whole premise. Right. So there's, in this podcast, people that are listening, they actually said they choose who they work with because they only want to work with good people. And I love that line that they drew in the sand around that, which I thought was great. But act the way you want to be remembered. What did
Mm.
you take from that when you heard them speak that line?
There is a lot, I guess, of advice we get along the way in life about how we need to act towards other people. And I took from that, knowing where those guys had been in their service in an operational duty, was that they needed to be, they were completely responsible for men and women's lives in an operational zone, and that whatever they did would have impact and consequences for those people well beyond the particular moment at which they were in. I believe that you've actually got to treat people in the way in which they need to be treated and need to be looked after. And I think it's amplified in that particular set of circumstances. But if you can bring it back to many other circumstances in which we lead other people, is that people give more, have more trust in a relationship with you when you treat them in the way in which they need to be treated. And there's an impact and that you will have, and it goes beyond that particular moment. It's a story that they will have for forever and a day. And if you think about, I guess, sort of some of the circumstances that you and I have had in our lives and the people listening to the podcast have had in their lives, you go, there was some impact and consequences there which I didn't like. And there, it's always it's being conscious of, what's the impact that I want to have. And I can think about to circumstances, both personally and professionally, where I go, you know what, that particular set of circumstances, that was not coming from a place that actually had consideration for the other people. It was actually coming from a place of ego or narcissism, and that there's an opportunity to actually do that differently. So that's what I take away from those comments.
Yeah, it's so good. So in leadership and moving forward, and so I want to kind of pivot a little bit for those that are listening. A lot of them have done Crucible, some of them have not, and they've done the work to start making that shift to where we love ourselves, where we have grace for ourselves, where we see our true selves, and we grow to love, I think, the good and the bad. We begin to accept that we are who we are, and we move forward. What are some of the basic principles that you teach leaders so that they can lead in a healthy way? What are some of those principles that you find very important for the people you coach?
I always start with becoming aware of who you are, self-awareness. We're the beneficiaries of the work that's been done to set up the Crucible Project, because it actually helps you really go deep into who you are at a core. The work that I do in the leadership programs that I run is very much about helping people understand that what we see at a surface level is actually just one data point. A data point for people is actually, what are my core values? And we actually have to go deep to actually understand what those are. I found the Crucible Project reminded me of what my core values are. It reminded me that perhaps I was out of alignment with some of those. And so for me, the leadership program is getting people to help to identify that they have some core values and that they show up whether you like it or not. And that you have an opportunity to actually get in alignment with those values. I think it's also recognizing that your values are maybe not the same as somebody else's. And that if we were to have a relationship with in a workplace scenario, it's about recognizing that sometimes we're going to disagree. That also comes out in sort of personalities and styles and approaches. For some of us, we just want to get stuff done. Others, we just want to have fun. And, there can be frustration that comes up in the workplace. And it goes back to, how do we actually work through and build a relationship where there's a level of self-acceptance, accepting that others are different, and actually how do we help others find their own gold, and also find work out how we can actually help people find their gold.
Right.
That's the challenge of a leader, is to actually help us ourselves find the gold in others, and to give them a sense of their of that they're bringing that gold to whatever the mission, task, activity is.
So what are some of the things you do within your leadership to help people become more self-aware? What are some of the tools you use to help them do that? And go ahead and answer that one, then I've got a follow-up.
Sure. Yeah. So look, I think if you get people just to actually think about, what are your values, and we actually use a list of commonly used words that describe values, and we help people work through that list to identify what those values are, and how they come up in their life, both personally and professionally, and with understanding that those values exist, is then being present to how do they actually then show up in terms of the way in which you manage and lead your teams. We also help people unpack their personality style. There are plenty of tools around to do that. The tools are actually really insightful, because I think we get, in terms of our leadership behavior, or even it doesn't need to be a leader to influence other people, is that we often do things and we get to a point where we go, I wish I hadn't done it that way. And we get in a loop and we continue to do things in a certain way. And I go, and you kind of go, why did I do it that way again? And that can often be helping them explore a level of, and understand more of themselves, can actually be a really useful tool to help them understand that there is a choice point in terms of making a different decision. Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning, talks about the fact that between stimulus and response is our freedom to choose. And I think that's, for me, is a really important thing, is to actually helping leaders identify that they actually have a choice. There's a choice in every moment of every day.
So you're saying some things here that I'm hearing a theme here. Can a leader be a great leader if he's not being coached by someone and helped to look at himself? And that may be a loaded question, because I think my answer is no, but it may be different, because it seems like if I'm going to coach other people, I need to be coached from someone. I can't ever just think I've got all the answers. So why is it important, maybe I ask it this way. Why would you think it would be important for a leader to have someone that coaches him or helps him or her, that helps them be who they need to be?
I think it's really easy to have a blind spot that you're not aware of. And that can be, if you're actually a coach, then you need somebody that can help you with that as well. For me, being a coach, I value having supervision around that coaching, somebody that can actually help me identify where my blind spots are. Our brains are about patterns of behavior. And so, the value of coaching is that we can actually help people have conversations. We can get them to talk out loud about those things. I actually heard just recently something, and I don't actually have the guy's name, but it was along these lines, which is that I'm better off talking to myself than listening to myself.
I love that. That's good.
Yeah. I'd rather talk out loud to actually express what I'm thinking, to actually be able to recognize. And the coach can actually help and give that back to you and feed that back to you. But if we're just listening to ourselves in our own echo chamber, then that can be really challenging, because it actually just sets up and reinforces certain patterns of behavior, probably ones that are not working for us.
Right. Yeah. And what's hard, I think, in any organization, I work in a church, but within Crucible or within any organization or even families, when there's the power dynamic, especially of the leader, people that are underneath the leader, they may see things, but it's so very difficult unless the culture is different. It's hard for them to bring that to the leader. They see it, but they can't bring it to the leader, because there's something at stake if they do.
Yeah. It's come up quite a bit recently for me in terms of some of the work I've done. You know, we as leaders, whether you've actually got leadership in your title or not, it's about creating an environment of trust. And if that trust includes the ability to be able to give feedback, and the ability to give feedback comes from when a leader sets the environment and models behavior that allows for feedback. When you're actually prepared to be vulnerable and to say, hey, this is not going so well. One of the quotes that I got from listening to John Maxwell many years ago was from Theodore Roosevelt: "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And I had an experience as a junior officer in the Navy. Walked onto this ship that was new to me, but the men in that ship, and they were all men in those days, had been into an operational area, and they had faced their own mortality. And I'm there in front of the team, sort of sharing my vision and expectations for going back to sea in the peacetime exercise areas off the coast of Australia. And I'm looking around and going, I'm not floating anybody's boat here, literally. And a couple of guys in the front row there, they had that face that a teenager has, the look.
Yes.
And I'm going like, the choices I've got here is to rant and rave. That ain't going to work. Or I just let it go through the keeper, and that's not a choice that I want to make here. And having heard that quote, I realized that I actually needed to connect with them on an individual basis. And when they understood that I actually cared about their experience, then suddenly we actually got a discretionary effort from them. And I actually invited them to give me feedback on my performance in the war games that we were, and simulations and training activities that we're doing. And it was so powerful. One of the maxims I have is that sometimes it's not about having all the answers. Sometimes it's about having great questions and being able to ask questions. There's a challenge for everybody in every set of circumstances to move from being technically competent to emotionally competent. And we get rewarded for being technically competent in our professional lives. And it's at some point we need to realize that it's actually the emotional competence that helps us build connection with people and build an environment of trust.
Man, that's so good. Thank you. So you said, become self-aware. What are a couple of other things in leadership you tell leaders that, become self-aware? What are a couple of other things that you find are very important for leaders to know as they try to move forward?
Yeah, look, it probably goes to what I just said before, which is that, despite the fact that you might know the answer, sometimes we just actually need to invite others to answer a question, to be prepared to not be the font of all knowledge, that actually it's really okay to actually invite people to think about it for themselves, to challenge people. A question I love is, what assumptions are you making right now? And that question's valid in both professional and personal life. How often and I'm going to go to the personal track here, is like, how often do we, in relationships, make assumptions about why somebody's behaving in a certain way? Whether it be with a spouse, life partner, children, family, we often make assumptions. And we need to find a way in which we can have a safe conversation about that and say, hey, I've actually got this going on for me right now. This is a story I'm telling myself. And I just want to check in, because I'm not sure that that's actually true.
Right.
Or I want to check in with you to see whether I've missed the mark here, or whether I'm, drinking some different Kool-Aid.
Yeah, there've been times, because again, I work for a church and there's lots of people and all that kind of stuff, and I'll see somebody walk by me and they don't say hello, something's going on, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they're angry or they're unhappy or whatever, and I assume that even their response to me has something to do with me. And then later on, when I found out about, you find out, they've just lost their job, or they're having a struggle with their children at home, or they've got, they're struggling at work, or there are all kinds of things going on. And I assumed that there was something to do with me. And which is narcissistic, or at least maybe not narcissistic, but thinking way too much of myself. But realizing they had so much going on that it wasn't even about me. It was
Yeah.
about their own struggle. And man, I think in all levels of life, that's very, very important. That's good. Those are good words for us to have.
Yeah. It's, as we've been talking, it's that moment where you realize that you're present with what's going on, and it's actually just checking in and saying, hey, what am I feeling here right now? What assumptions am I making? What might I need to actually test with the person that's in front of me in this really important relationship? And taking it back to sort of why I ended up on a weekend, I had a lot of stuff going on in my head that had sort of shaped the way which I behaved in a personal way, and it was actually detracting from my ability to be the best that I possibly could in the professional sense as well. And a lot of it was wrapped up around sort of making assumptions about why people were doing certain things.
I think an assumption I think there would be out there is that leadership is about getting to the bottom line. And I know that it is. I mean, I know that we all have those things that we need to get to and get things done, but I may be hearing from you, and I'm going to put these words in your mouth, and if it's not true, then change that. Yes, there's a bottom line, and yes, there's a movement of where the company needs to go, but it sounds like there's almost a very important role of managing the people and caring about the people and loving your people and loving your team so that you do get to the end, to the bottom line. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, look, it's come up actually just recently in a couple of workshops I've been running. We talk sometimes about the characteristics of leaders that we like to be with and ones that we don't. And interesting enough, on the list of characteristics of leaders that we don't want to be, aggressiveness came up. And somebody's actually said, though, actually being aggressive and focused and determined about shifting something or a goal could also be a characteristics of an effective leader. It's that ability to actually take people and the task together. I often use this sort of metaphor, is that being leadership is about task and people. It's not a choice between one or the other. It's actually a choice for both. It's a bit like being in a rowboat. You got two oars,
right?
One's task and one's people. And if you only use one of those oars, then you're going to go around in circles. If you use one more than the other, you'll probably go off course. But the challenge for the leader is actually, how do I maintain a focus on the task and the people? At the end of the day, the task will not get done without the people.
Right. That's golden. If you didn't say anything else today, that's great. And I think us learning to do that is so important as leaders, and being a leader is difficult. This is not something for the faint of heart. It's not something that you could do. You got to work at it. You've got to have the skills. You've got to have the training.
Yeah. Look, a growth mindset's so important. But I say this too, is that, we can be one moment away from leadership and having to step up. And, I think it's, that leadership, it doesn't have to be big. It could be in your own family.
Yeah.
Something in the community, in your neighborhood. And so that's going back to the benefit that I've got from the Crucible Project, has been to be able to go deeper in my own self-awareness. And my encouragement to people would be that if you're thinking about going to a weekend, then there are so many benefits to it. There's personal growth, there's personal transformation, there's reconciling certain things in your life, there's an opportunity to be in integrity with who you are at a core, and all of that can also come out in both a personal and professional way, and there's so much gold in that.
So give me one more nugget. You've given us a bunch of nuggets, so thank you. Give me one more nugget that you give to leaders. So being authentic, asking people to think for themselves. What's one more nugget that as leaders you love to give people when you're coaching them?
I have a maxim that is, doesn't matter whether the glass is half full or half empty, as long as it quenches your thirst. And that comes from, in life, we have many gifts. I believe that we were, created in a way that was about something, and we have a purpose in our lives. And it's actually what I've found personally is actually the ability to get back into purpose and to have great clarity around that. That's one of the outcomes for me from Crucible Weekend and being involved in the community is actually great clarity of purpose. And, you got to do what quenches your thirst. I think you got to do what satisfies your purpose.
Right.
And, finding that purpose is work that I think is worthwhile doing.
Absolutely. And all the people that you've interviewed, what was fascinating to me, and I think part of this is, you watch movies that are about the military and you hear things, and I think there's some preconceived notions about the military people, and I just always thought they were hard and they were, cruel, and not cruel, but this is the way we're going, and all that kind of stuff. And then I meet people in the military and they're never that way. What have you found in these military people that you're interviewing? What have you found that has just been the most beautiful, life-changing, life-giving thing that you found with each one? And is there a thread that kind of runs through each leader that you've interviewed, maybe that you've seen? Because I found when I listened to them, there seems to be great care for people. Like over and over again, there seems to be awareness. And maybe it's just the people you choose to interview, but they seem aware and they seem open and they seem coachable, and they look at the mistakes they made as leaders and where they wounded people and hurt people. And, there's all kinds of stories, but what is a beautiful thread that you've seen through each one of the leaders, or at least many of the leaders that you've interviewed, that you'd just love to let us know?
Yeah, I think there's probably three things. One is that, as you said, it's the care for people, recognizing that none of the endeavors of which they undertook in military service would get done unless it was actually the people and their actually care and connection for them. The second thing is actually humility, and being humble about that responsibility and role. And for many of those I've interviewed, it came at a very young age, and people in their early 20s then responsible for a platoon of soldiers in the front line in Afghanistan or in Iraq, and just that while the training is powerful, kicked in, at the end of the day, it was actually leading other humans into something that was quite confronting and challenging. And the last thing I would say in terms of characteristics would be the nature of the value of service. And, there was that value of service is sort of clear when you're in the military, but for many of those folk, it actually extends beyond their time in service, in the full-time service. And it's actually services of value in terms of what they do now. It's actually, again, linked to purpose. I might make one other point, which is you talked about how Hollywood might stereotype the military leader as sort of at the front, gung-ho, leading people. But another maxim I have with people is that our role as a leader is not to be the hero. It's actually to be the guide. Our job is to be the guide. Our job is to help people get to where they can go. Our job is to help people to connect with their own purpose, to connect with who they are at a core, to help them be their best selves. And
Man, that is so good. Is there anything else before we wrap up today? Is there anything else you would love to share with our listeners today that you feel that you've learned that you would just like to pass on to us? Maybe that you've learned as a person, as a father, as a partner, as a leader.
Yeah. Look, you know what? It's never too late to go and do the work. It's never too late to deal with something in your life that's perhaps not been the way you wanted it to be. I many years in service full time. Thought I had it all together. And in many ways, on a professional level, I did. But there was sort of personal stuff. And I go, you know what, I have really appreciated the opportunity to actually have a second chance in many things that I'm now doing with family. And so the bottom line is it's never too late. Yeah. It's never too late to be able to go and do the work and to change course, to use a Navy term.
Right. I love it. Thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, again, today we've had Martin Brooker on here, martinbrooker.com, Frontline to Boardroom. There's many things to look out on his website, but also the podcasts are fascinating, and I think they're very good. And I've learned a lot from each of the ones that I've gotten to listen to, and I'm trying to make my way through all of them. So people listening, go listen to some of this, because there's gold in each one. And these people are fascinating people with great stories to tell.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. God bless.
God bless you.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.